Big tech battle. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg announcing that President Trump has been banned indefinitely from both Facebook and Instagram. Zuckerberg says the risk of him using the platforms are too great. The ban will last at least 2 weeks until a peaceful transition of power is complete. Twitter, meantime, unlocking the president's account after a 12-hour ban following the riot on Capitol Hill. Joining me now is disruptive tech research founder and chief analyst Lou Basenese. Lou, will social... I have a lot to say about this, but I'm just going to ask you,
we've talked about it before, David.
Will social media companies come under more pressure to control what is posted on their platforms? And this is not just about President Trump. This is about censoring thought, that people who run these billionaire oligarchs who run these giant tech companies, they and their employees don't agree with a lot of conservative thought. So is it about censorship? And what is the fallout for the companies and the stocks even?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I think, look, what we're learning is that you can put a president in timeout like a toddler and change behavior. And I think that needs to be done to some extent on these social media platforms. Dagan, you and I have talked about this before. There's reprehensible content like murders that get shown over this periodically. And Zuckerberg tries to shun any responsibility. The same thing with Jack Dorsey at Twitter. So I think they need to do something. Self-regulation is not working. They're not monitoring that. The other side of that coin, though, is obviously the fear of censorship. So there's got to be some middle ground. I think the key would be an act similar to Sarbanes-Oxley for social media, where you put these executives criminally responsible, personally responsible, threaten them with being in an orange jumpsuit and watch how fast that they can moderate and clean up the content. In terms of the stocks, like investors have shown really they don't care. Like it's all about the networks and the ads and the size of the network. They really traditionally, I mean, look at Facebook. I mean, how many times have they gotten in trouble and that stock has just marched higher?
James Freeman, though, that cleaning up the content, when I hear people say that, I hear censorship. And I saw what Twitter did to the New York Post, one of the largest newspapers in the country. And at that moment when you could not share, it's not just that they shut down the New York Post Twitter account for, I think, 10 days or longer. It was the fact that nobody was allowed to share a story that was reported about Hunter Biden because it was a political bomb for the figurative bomb for the Biden campaign. And so the companies, they have so much power and they control so much of what we do and say, and they, in a split second, will shut somebody down and shut down a national newspaper. And so I see, like, where does it go from here? Because they're so big you can't control them unless you break them up.
Well, just to emphasize your point, the New York Post reporting was true.
Right.
It wasn't just that the social media companies were suppressing reporting or opinions they didn't like. It was literally suppressing what is, looking back, one of the biggest political news stories, maybe the biggest political news story of last year that was blocked by Twitter, by others. So I think a lot of Americans obviously don't want these social media companies deciding what we're allowed to see and what views are allowed to be shown to us, and also what legitimate factual news is permitted to make its way to us. So I guess I'd ask Lou, is there any emerging market competition here? People have talked about Parler. Some people are trying that as the alternative to Twitter. There have been other efforts to kind of create a free speech platform. Do any of these create a market problem for big tech as opposed to a political problem?
Yeah, James, I think it's a great question. I mean, you're reading my mind here. I was going to say, like, this opens moderation. The risk of it is censoring truth, right? but it opens a window of opportunity for another network, another platform to come in that's not going to have these impacts, that's not going to have this tremendous oversight and control over content. To date, I haven't seen anything. I mean, it's one of those things, though, that a competitor can come on the scene in social media. We've seen it before. I mean, look at Snap. They went from 0 to 300 million users in record time. So it's about someone innovating. And, the name of my firm is Disruptive Tech Research. Like, I truly believe in innovation and ingenuity. So there's an opportunity here. Someone's got to, whoever's listening out in Silicon Valley or in these other hotbeds of innovation and throughout the country, there's a great opportunity here. We know the model works. You just got to make it better. I don't think we can count on the Twitters and Facebooks of the world and Snapchat to do it right. They just haven't. They've had plenty of opportunities.
I look at Google, and Google owns YouTube and the censorship there. And Google's so big, it's almost impossible to challenge it in terms of how it serves ads to websites. Because if Google, and we've seen it with the Federalist, if Google decides that it doesn't like what you're publishing, they will deplatform you and shut you down and put you out of business. Now, if the Federalist is, of course, in business, but we saw what happened in the last year with that. But this is where the free market has in some ways failed, because these companies like Facebook were allowed to gobble up company after company after company, and it was allowed to happen. And now they're so big, we have no control over who they censor and how much. So, Lou, thank you for being here. I talked a lot.
Yeah. No problem.
More time for you next time, Lou Basenese.